Warning: MF Uncensored contains adult language and discussion. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to MF Uncensored. Don't forget, if you guys are listening to us on the go, you can find us on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, basically anywhere you get your podcast. You can also find more of our content on our website, themisfitfaction.com. There you find links to not only this show, but some of our other shows like the Multiverse Fancast and Cinematic Adventures. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Paul, and with me today via the Zoom studio, because that's how podcasts are done nowadays, where nobody sits in a room together anymore. One of the few benefits of the last couple of years is Zoom and just making it so much easier for podcasters, especially to connect. I have the CEO of Miguel LeBron Coaching LLC, Mr. Name in the marquee, Miguel LeBron. Miguel, how are you?
I am well. Thank you for having me today.
It is truly an honor because I love talking to people that are, do their own business, because it's easy to get podcasters to talk to other podcasters.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
if you post, I think you and I we connected on Facebook in one of the many podcast groups that I'm sure you're in, I'm sure I'm in. And it's funny when you talk to other podcasters about being on shows, they're like, yeah, I'll talk about my podcast. I was like, but I talk about my podcast on my show. So
Right.
I love getting people that are well-rounded, that have other things. And I always have a big respect for people who like do their own business, do their own work. And I'm really curious to kind of learn a little bit more about you. So why don't you first start off telling our audience what you do?
Sure. So I'm a personal growth strategist. What that means is that I help individuals think strategically so that they can accomplish their goals.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that started was that several years ago, I started doing a search, and you can do this yourself. You can do a Google search, and if you search the word strategy, it's either going to be about the boardroom or the war zone. And I found that very frustrating because, well, I was in neither. And I felt like I didn't relate to the everyday person. And so the more I read on that, found information on it, I figured I'd come up with my own definition. And so my definition of strategy is a defined number of steps for a breakthrough moment. And the key there is to identify how far I am from the breakthrough that I want to have. And so the key part is that you may be 5 steps away from your breakthrough moment where I may be 10. And so there should be no comparison in this. I should be honest to where am I and who do I have to become and what do I have to do to be the person that accomplishes the breakthrough moment that I'm seeking to accomplish. And that's where I navigate and help individuals and think strategically on those goals.
Oh, wow. Like that. Hold on. I'm processing. Give me 4
Okay.
seconds. All right, we're good. So I want to just really quickly jump back to something. So we did an episode. We do an episode every year on this show called New Year's Resolutions Are Bullshit.
Uh-huh.
And the reason we do it is because one of our other co-hosts who couldn't be here today, he works in the martial arts field, and it's a lot of self-empowerment and a lot of strategic steps, like some of the things that you were describing. So we always kind of say that when people start with New Year's resolutions, they start with the biggest, most vague, most like, lose weight. Well, how much weight? I don't know. I'm just going to lose weight. So I like the idea that you're talking about, here are your steps. Here's what you have to do in order to get. Some people just don't want to hear it.
Right. So my thought on New Year's resolutions and
please.
I think the issue is what you touched on. We create these radical goals that, I mean, so think about this. If my goal for 2023 is to reach the moon, you're like, okay, that's a big goal. And of course, everyone says, well, if your goal doesn't scare you, then it's not big enough. It's like, listen, it should scare you straight. It should, so I think with reference to a goal like that, reaching the moon, okay, well, if you're afraid of heights, address that first before trying to reach the moon. And so to me, it's practical goals lead to a radical life and not the other way around. And I think one of the big issues is that people walk into the New Year's and they say, okay, January 1st, I'm going to live this radical life. Well, you should have started probably around December 15th, laying the habits so that when January came around, at least you already had a routine that leads to where you want to get to.
Now, speaking of habits, do you find it more challenging to break old habits or create new ones?
That's a good question. I think the issue lies with the perspective of it. So it's like, I want to accomplish X, Y, Z. Okay, what are the steps I have to do? And that's a simple question. That's a question we all ask. But I think the mindset shift is, what's the person I have to become? And so, we talk a lot about the multiverse, right? If you're into superheroes, right? And
On
so
this show, what?
and so we talk about the multiverse, and it's like, well, is there an alternative version of you? And so let's play around this idea. If there is an alternative version of you that is accomplishing the things you want to accomplish, what is that alternative of you doing to accomplish those things? Now the question becomes, can I do it in this universe?
Mhm.
Most often the answer is yes, I can do it. It's just, again, that shifting of idea of, okay, who do I have to become in order to do those things? And what would that person do? And can I do them? And most often the answer is just simply yes. And so then now it becomes the issue of habit. Okay, can I do that in a consistent basis? I'll give you an example.
Oh, yeah.
I know a lady who wanted to lose weight, right? This is a common goal that we all have. And so she wanted to lose weight. And in the idea of losing weight, she joined one of these programs where it's like, lose X amount in
Mhm.
25 days, right? And lo and behold, shell out the money. And hey, wouldn't you know that by the end of it, indeed, she had lost a dramatic amount of weight. Only one issue, that by the time the program ended, she didn't want to do the program again.
Right.
And so what happened was that she gained the weight back.
All back. Yeah,
Yeah, of course.
of
And so
course.
that's not a practical goal. The idea of losing weight is wonderful, but it's not a practical goal because you can't live it out every day. You can't create a habit of going to these extreme, workout regimens or whatever the case may be, because again, you can't live that out every day. But if we create these simple habits that I can live it out every single day. Like, okay, waking up early and going to bed early. I can do that every day. And you think, well, that's not going to lead for me being the person I want to be. Well, no, not today. But if we consistently do this, then you can build to that person that achieves those goals you want to achieve.
That's awesome, man. Like seriously, I'm like getting mild chills. But so it's funny you say that because like I'm someone that really struggled with health and weight loss over the years. I also worked in martial arts for a long time. And when I was doing that, I was in great shape because I was doing martial arts for 7 hours a day.
Right.
And it was part of the culture, part of the mindset. And then when I switched career paths, my entire world flipped upside down and I
Mhm.
struggled. And I was the same person. I would be like, that same kind of person that's like, all right, I'm going to lose weight. So I'm going to go on this extreme diet and I'm going to do these extreme workouts. I was working out like an hour and a half every day at
Wow.
minimum.
Yeah. Mhm.
And while maybe I've looked a certain aesthetic, I didn't feel good inside. Like I felt miserable all the time. I did a nutritional supplement. I'm not going to say its name on the podcast because I don't want to get sued. However, they encourage cleansing. So
Mm.
for like 3 days, you do their cleanse and then you eat moderately afterwards. I did 3 days and I was like, I'm starving.
Yeah. You're
And I
dying by the end of
and I
it.
gained all the weight back. And I was like, well, do I have to now I have to buy the program again? It was like
Yeah.
$300. So I think in a world, especially with, a lot of gimmicks in self-help and self-improvement, it's very refreshing to hear somebody that's a little bit more going a different strategy about it. And obviously strategy is your word.
Yeah. Yeah. So to me, the idea is like, to me, it should be simple. All right. So a while back, several years ago, I had this idea that I was like, I want to become a better writer. I was already doing public speaking, but I was like, I want to become a better writer. And so it's like, okay, well, how do I become a better writer? Well, I could be one of those people that do these lengthy 5,000 word posts on Facebook. But to be honest, I'm not a big fan of that. So
Oh,
I said, okay, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I was already launching my website. So I figured I'm going to start a weekly blog. And that's what I did. I challenged myself every week to write a blog. And after a while, I was like, I wonder if I can challenge myself to do a daily blog. And I did that for a couple months. I figured out, hey, no, I can't do a daily blog because, well, I got a wife, I got kids, I got X, Y, Z. And so I didn't consider it a failure, the fact that I wasn't able to do it for a year, because it was an experiment. And I did see not only an improvement in my writing after I had done over a year long of weekly blogs and then transitioned into daily blog. I saw not only an improvement in my writing, but also in my speaking ability and the ability to actually become more conscious of how I'm using words and how long does it take to speak something out. And so in that sense, it's very practical to start by saying, okay, well, I'm just going to write once a week, and then let me see where I can challenge myself to grow.
so again, I probably should just hire you at this point because For those of you guys who've listened to the show, our show is relatively new. We've only been around for this show in particular has been around for about a year and a half, and we've experienced incredible growth. We were just featured on we were a featured podcast on Podbean, which was like the
That's
cool thing.
awesome.
So a big shout out to Podbean
Yeah.
for helping us out with that. But when we first started, I did the exact same thing where I was like, all right, we managed to book some high level interviews right away. I was doing 4, 5, 6 interviews a week.
Oh, wow.
And I found myself so incredibly burnt out that when we got to a point where I stopped scheduling them, I was like, I can't. I'm
Mhm.
like emotionally drained. I love to podcast. I love it. It's like my favorite thing to do. If I could do it full time, I would. But
Right.
it's the same thing. I have a job. I have a wife. We have a cat who demands all the attention. So
Yeah.
it's funny you say that because this is actually we're just getting back into interviews for
Mhm.
the year. And that was the goal. One interview a week, it's nothing crazy. But so it's always funny. I find that when I was trying to book a bunch of interviews, I got burnt out. But when I
Mhm.
take my time and I really kind of read who's looking for who's looking for to guest host, who's doing this, I find that I find much more suited people to be on the show rather
Yeah.
than just people who are like, here's my stuff. There you go.
Right, right, right. Just throwing at the dark to see what happens.
Yeah, and so you do have your own podcast too, so you kind of understand the mentality about it. So tell our listeners a little bit about your show.
Yeah, certainly. So the podcast is Strategy Rewind, and the idea is to help individuals develop the proper mindset and strategies for the to accomplish their goals, to accomplish their breakthrough moment. And so what the idea is to be able to, in a practical way, explain strategies that is used in an everyday manner. Again, when I began doing the search, I found that strategies were highlighted more in the boardroom or in the war zone. And
Right.
so, wait a minute, how does this serve the everyday person? And so, I have episodes on how to deal with grief, how to buy a house, how to pick a spouse. And it's like we use strategies in those. And then there are some where go into leadership, mindset, personal growth, etc. But so what we try to do is that focus on the strategies in a practical sense that the listener within 15, 20 minutes of listening can actually say, okay, I can do this today. I can put it into action or at least start moving in that direction.
So when you talk to people, is it a one-on-one thing? Is it a group setting? Like how does it if I wanted to hire you to be my strategic coach, how would that process kind of start to move and what would it be like for me?
Yeah, so I have done one-on-ones and I've done groups as well. Actually, in November we did a gratitude group, and we were thinking. Actually, it's the 90-degree thinking. So how can I think, shift my way so that I can think more appropriately, right? So in the month of November we did that with a small group, and the concept of that coaching group was again to shift our mindsets. It's easy to say, especially in the month of November, well, I'm going to be grateful. Okay, but what am I going to be grateful for? Can I challenge myself to be grateful even for the things that I don't consider a blessing, or that I don't consider providence, or that I don't consider to be a good thing? Can I be grateful even in those moments? So I've done the small groups, and I've also done one-on-one. The first step is a consultation. So we would sit together, try to identify what is it that you want to accomplish. And I've had conversations with individuals where they're like, well, I want to accomplish this and that. And it's like, okay, let's pull back the reins. And my thought is always have one big goal and
Mm.
then 2 or 3 smaller goals. Because if you have this one big goal that covers the next 6 months, and in that you have these smaller goals that aren't going to take so long, it creates more momentum as you head towards the finish line of this big goal that is going to take 6 to 8 months to accomplish. And so I always like to start off with that one-on-one conversation and say, okay, well, there's not going to be massive results in this 30-minute conversation. It's more
Right.
of, do we fit? Can we work together? Yes. Okay. What does that then look like on, having communication on a weekly basis? Some individuals need communications on a weekly, other need on a daily. And I had one client who needed simply, a text message. And then we would, every couple weeks get together on a visual version like this, like Zoom. And but I would just send him a text message like, hey, I'm rooting for you. He needed that type of encouragement because
Right.
the anxiety that he felt was blocking him from doing as simple things as getting behind the wheel of his vehicle. And so it was powerful to see the space where we waited 2 weeks before getting on a Zoom call. But when we got on a Zoom call, all of that daily motivation was enough for him to get behind the wheel and then drive a mile and then start increasing that. And so, again, having those conversations of what exactly is it that the individual wants to accomplish? And then what exactly is it that they need in that particular moment?
That's awesome, man. Like, so I want to go back to something that you brought up about the
Mhm.
one gentleman who, with anxiety, he's having
Yeah.
trouble. Like, so do you find that men, especially, because we just did an interview with somebody, we talked mental health and we talked about men in particular. Do you find that men put up a little bit more resistance to just accepting help, much less following through, or do you find it's just purely individual?
I'm having trouble with, I suppose this is a side note, but I'm having trouble with these generalizations. Like I see this a lot where it's like all men want is XYZ, and I'm like, I don't want that. Like I don't want you to want. It's like all women want is, and then I look at my wife and it's like, nah, that ain't it. So I think in a general sense, however, I think in a general sense, it is difficult for anyone to feel comfortable enough to express themselves because there's a level of vulnerability where I don't know if I'm going to be accepted, rejected, ridiculed, etc. So there's a level of vulnerability there that oftentimes people don't want to get into. When we talk about men specifically, coming from the Latin community as a Latin individual, oftentimes I encounter other Latin men who is like they feel like, nah, I can't. It's the machismo. It's the
Oh, yeah.
culture of, they can't see you cry, and then that expands even beyond just the Latin community, whereas everyone or a lot of men feel like, nah, I can't let them see me cry. I gotta suck it up. I gotta be a man.
Rub
And
some dirt in
so,
it. Yep.
yeah. And so those, it becomes more of, okay, how do I have a conversation that speaks the language of this individual? And I'm a fan of that challenge. Right. So how do I speak in a way that this individual understands that I understand them? And for some people, it's as clear as me saying, I understand. And then for some people, it's, well, let me share with you my struggle so that you can understand that I literally understand that I've been in that situation.
See, I think that empathy is a very powerful force, and just being
Mhm.
able to put like, there's nothing more frustrating than somebody just being like, "Well, get over it." Like,
Right.
you don't know how to like something. Sometimes you need to be told, "Get over it," like move
Yeah.
on. However, like there are plenty of times where like, I'm a big advocate for mental health. I'm a big advocate for self-empowerment, self-improvement,
Mhm.
and I love listening to people do different things. Like I saw Tony Robbins live. Obviously he's the big one, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
But like it didn't resonate with me. It wasn't
Mhm.
it wasn't my language that he was
Right.
speaking. I've spoken to so many professionals, and I get a little bit of something every time I talk to someone, and I find it incredibly refreshing that your first step is to overcome that resistance is to be like, "Hey, I've been there.
Yeah.
It's not easy,
Yeah.
but it's fixable." But you seem like a very you have to put in the work kind of guy. Like if I came to you going, "Hey, I want this goal," you're going to be the guy that says, "Well, you're going to have to work for it. You're going to have to like, here's where we are. Let's move."
Right, right, exactly. And yes. And I'm that way with even with myself. So it's not one of those things where it's like, like for example, in full transparency, one of the things that this year I wanted to do was be a little healthier. And so I found out that I have some health issues and I need a CPAP. And so I didn't know that about me. And as last year was ending, I started, getting together with my doctor and figuring out what was going to happen. But I knew that I was going to be getting the CPAP this year. I actually got it a couple of days ago. So one of the things that I said to myself is, okay, I need to become a better version of me, a healthier version of me, because what happens is that in the life of trying to build a business, in the life of trying to get yourself out there in social media, in the life of be a good husband, be a good father, be all these things, some of the things fall to the wayside. And for me, it was that being able to establish healthier habits. And so what I did was this, and I went ahead, started last year. So I didn't start January per se. I started mid-December. I said, okay, I'm going to start increasing my water intake. And that may sound simple for someone who drinks a lot of water, but for me, on the go, 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 I could drink a lot of coffee, but water just wasn't the go-to. So now, again, thinking practically, how did I do it, or how have I done it? I set alarms on my phone because my phone is always with me. So
Right.
I set alarms on my phone that says drink water, and it's like, all right, here I go. Here's my bottle. I gotta drink
Yeah,
water,
that's
right?
water. Yep.
Yeah, so alarm goes off, boom, I set that up. Fantastic. What's the next thing? Well, I gotta get better with sleeping. So now I've gone ahead and figured out a routine that works for me for sleeping. But in order to do that, what I did was that I spoke with my wife and I said, hey, listen, I know you got to wake up in the morning. I don't want to put an alarm that conflicts with yours. What
Right.
time are you going to be up? She said 6:30. I said, great. I'm gonna be up by 6:30 a.m. I'll go to bed by 11:30 p.m. So I've been doing that. So now there's no excuse for her to be mad because somehow I figured out I might be able to wake up at 5 a.m. after going to bed at 1 a.m. Like, there's no argument because now I know specifically. So now, as the CPAP is coming around, well, I've already been able to establish a routine on sleeping, establish a routine on water intake. And now as I'm gonna get ready to start going to the gym, is like, well, I've already been doing all these things. So
Right.
I'm not dependent on, gee, I hope that my membership really works out at the gym, or that the CPAP really changes my sleeping pattern. No, no, no. I've already been going to bed early and waking up early. And so there lies the detail. It's can you make it a lifestyle? Can you work it out every single day? And it's the first time I'm sharing any of those details, but I'm sharing it because I think it's valuable to understand, if we think about our goals in a practical way, then it's more easier. One of the things I even did was, let me break this down in years. Where do I want to be in 5 years from now? And what does that version of 5 years from now of me looks like? And are they going to be happy with the things I did now? Or are they going to look at me and be like, you really didn't set me up for victory here?
Right. Oh, that's awesome. Because like I think visualizing yourself in the future, I also want to be like, well, what did that guy do? What did
Hmm.
that guy do that I have to do right now? And I love how you bring up these little micro changes. Because obviously, like if a health issue comes up, there's a time, like there's a fair chance, especially, I'm in my mid 30s. So I just found out my cholesterol is a little high. I was like,
Mm.
what? I'm 35. What are you
Yeah.
talking about?
Oh, we're the same age. I'm
Oh, look
35
at
too.
that.
Yeah.
So I'd go and do blood work and go for my physical for the first time in like 8 years. I'll be honest.
Hmm. Hmm.
And my doctor's like, you're very healthy. Just we got to do blood work and all that stuff.
Right.
Blood work back, and it's like high cholesterol. I was like, what? Now, full transparency on my end. I may not have properly fasted the night before because
Right, right, right.
I work out for so much just so I can eat so much.
Mhm,
It's how I balance. Obviously, a medical condition comes up, something that it's either do this or bad
mhm.
consequences, and it could make your life drastically different.
Yeah.
But the fact that you already had some of these more smaller changes that you'd already put into place, like going to a CPAP, but you've already started fixing your sleeping habits, because sleep habits are a really big issue in our country
Yeah.
nowadays.
Yeah.
Like I just started setting my phone so that it goes into sleep mode at 9
Oh,
p.m.
yeah, I do the same thing, yeah.
Yeah, so now like my whole screen turned
Just
gray
go
the first time.
black
I was
and
like,
white. Yeah,
What is
yeah,
this? What happened?"
yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, it's 9 o'clock. I have to start
I
powering."
did I was meaning to, a few years back, I went ahead and I said, "Forget it. I'm disconnecting from all social media platforms." It
Mm,
wasn't that it was toxic or anything like that. I just said, I'm investing a lot of time." So I disconnected entirely. Well, one of the things I did this year, and I thought about maybe I should do that again. Instead of doing that, I've put a timer on Facebook and YouTube and
uh,
Instagram. And it does a similar thing. That is that when time is reaching out, it'll be like, you got 5 minutes left on this app. And I'm like, oh no. And it goes black and white. And then I was like, goodbye, boom, and you're out of the app. And yeah. And so a couple of days ago, I was watching something on YouTube. And the video is fairly lengthy, but there I was watching it and it said 5 minutes. I was like, no. So I tried to speed up the
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 playback time.
video. Yeah. And but it blocked me out anyways. And so my wife was like, what's wrong? I was like, I just got kicked out of YouTube. She was like, how'd you do that? I was like, because I put a timer. And it's like, I don't want to go back to the old me. Like I don't want to go to
Right.
that old version. And thinking again, if I'm 35, then okay, who do I want to be when I'm 40? And like you said, what does that person have to do to get to that point of success? well, then I have to commit to this timer that I've set, even though it's annoying.
So I also find it exceptionally refreshing that you have your own goals and habits and things that you do. Like you get so many of these, and I'm going to put this in quotes. This is
Mm,
in no way an insult to anybody.
yeah.
Um, inspirational, like motivational kind of people,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's their business. And some are fantastic. I have friends that do motivational speaking, and
Mhm.
like people that I'm very close to, and they're very good at what they do. Then you're scrolling through like YouTube TV or whatever, and suddenly you see like that guy who's putting on the show, but you could tell he's not very good at what he does, or he
Mm,
doesn't practice what he preaches.
right.
We had a rival martial arts school that we, I don't want to say we put out of business, but we impacted their business because the guy who was running it was morbidly obese,
Mm,
but is not taking care of himself. Like, I don't want to learn martial arts from a guy that doesn't look like he could actually do martial arts.
right, right,
So
right.
I find it awesome that you, as somebody who's like, hey, if you want to work with me, here are the things that I do myself. Like, here are the things that I work on. So I find that exceptionally refreshing.
Yeah, yeah. To me, there one of the words that I think were thrown around several years ago, and some words they kind of just come back around. I think one of the words is transparency, is authenticity.
Mm.
And people talk about, "Well, be your authentic self," and then you scroll around and you say, wow, this person seems authentic, but when you dig in a little deeper, like, wait a minute, they talk about work life harmony, but then it's like they're in the middle of a divorce, and that's no shade on someone who's in that situation, but it's like, how can you speak about work life harmony and you're in the middle of that situation?
Right.
There's not harmony there then. And so how could I speak about practical goals will lead to a radical life, and then I'm over here saying I'm going to get to the moon but I'm afraid of heights? It's like that doesn't make sense. That doesn't equal out. I think the message and the messenger need to be aligned, and there lies authenticity, there lies transparency. Then it's easy for me to sit down and say, hey, you know what, you feel like you failed, guess what, I've been there before too.
Yeah. So for you though, I know we kind of already talked about it a little bit, but
Mhm.
I'm just curious, what are the most common things that people come to you for?
Yeah, so initially my journey started in the nonprofit organizations. And so because I was a leader in nonprofit organizations, most individuals that would come up to me had the fear of speaking in public. And
Right.
so they would come up and say, okay, well, I want to speak in public. And I was putting out these strategies that they could put into action. And I was, tailoring them to whoever I was speaking to, rather it was someone young or old or in between. And so I was working that way. That's when I realized, wait a minute, I could probably leverage this into more of a business where, yes, I'm providing a service, but I'm also gaining dividends, something that you don't gain in the nonprofit sector. And so
Hence the
as
name.
I yeah, as I transitioned on, because I was producing my own podcast, I had people that reached out and said, hey, help me with my podcast. And I was like, yes, because, well, I'm transitioning to providing a service. And then I realized, yeah, that ain't it. That's not it. So really, I had to get very clear. And so to answer the question of who do I work with, it's really that everyday individual, that mom and pop, that person who's trying to balance life and school, trying to balance work and home and marriage and their spirituality, and still somehow get to being the person they can be proud of before they hit the grave. And so those are the people that I like to work with, those everyday individuals, those mom and pop people that are trying to really be prosperous despite the average day situations.
That's awesome. Can you tell us one of your biggest success stories? Like a story that comes to mind that you're just like, man, that was just freaking awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So there was an individual whom I was working with reference to public speaking, and
Mhm.
this individual was was very direct, very dry when he spoke. And so every time he wanted to get a chance to speak, and there were these moments where he would get the chance to speak, it was, hey, you got 30 minutes to speak. And within 5 minutes, he was done because it was like straight to the point. And
No
and so he was
nuance,
like,
no show, no flash. I got it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he was like, I need to figure out, how do I stretch this out? How do I bring the value, but also bring people along in the ride? And so I was able to sit down with him, and it wasn't like a 2-day thing. It was through a few months, different exercises of, okay, speak now, speak here, speak in these moments, speak on these topics, engage in this. And through these various challenges, again, tailored to him and what he was trying to accomplish, he was able then to get a point, and this was actually last year, where he was able to stand in front of a crowd and nearly 200 people, and he was able to stand in front of them, and he was able for 45 minutes to speak, that by the end everybody rose and applauded, and he was like, oh my goodness, it works, it actually works.
Yeah, it's funny
Um,
because like I have no problem with public speaking, but for
mhm.
45 minutes, that is a long amount of public speaking.
Yeah, it is. It is. And of course, you talk about from 5 minutes to 45 minutes, and that's
Huge.
that. Yeah, it's massive. And not only just to do it, but to do it, feel confident in the message that you're delivering. I recently we actually have an episode on the podcast where this lady, she was having issues with anxiety, and her issues with anxiety were so serious that although she loved poetry, and she still does love poetry, she does poetry, she was standing on in the stage in one particular event, the spotlight hit her, and she ran off the stage and out of the door
Oh no.
because of her anxiety. And so yeah, that's an episode there where we talk about anxiety, and on that one I share my own reflection on how I was able to deal with anxiety that I just didn't know I had.
And it's funny you say that because like obviously we discovered during the course of this podcast we're the same age. Wild.
Yeah.
I never ask. I always just say my age and see where the other person kind of vets on that. But
Right.
growing up, people didn't talk about anxiety. People only talked about depression after something terrible happens,
Mhm.
and
Right.
it's so weird. Or my personal favorite, ADD or ADHD.
Oh yeah, no, you wouldn't have none of that. We
No,
didn't have none
he's
of
just
that.
hyper. He's got a lot of energy. He had sugars that
Exactly.
day.
Take him to
So
the park. He'll be all right.
let him play it out. But it's funny you say that because like nowadays there's such a more common understanding about especially things like anxiety, depression.
Mhm.
One of the worst things you ever hear is, "I don't know why that happened. That person was always so happy." You look at like a Robin Williams or something like that. Like
Yeah.
everybody was like depressed, suicidal. Like we could not. How
Yeah.
would we know? And you never know what people are really dealing with. And I think that nowadays it's a lot better just culturally. Like, hey, I'm feeling a little anxious. Like, I know I can go up to my wife and tell her, hey, I'm feeling anxious. And she's like, all right, well, what are you feeling? I hate going to
Mhm.
the city. That's the best example. I hate going to the city. I love the city, but I hate going.
Right, yeah.
Went to Comic Con last year.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, yeah, we had a good time. It was her first time there. It was my second time there, but I don't like crowds.
Mm.
More because I'm ready to just throw hands. Like, who just touched me? Like, just
Right.
so she's very good at just like we're walking, she'll be the one who just holds my arm. She knows
Mhm.
what I'm getting. So I think it's a powerful thing that, recognizing anxiety, depression, and also our own personal faults. So I
Yeah.
that's just a really cool story, and I really like it. So how's she doing now?
Oh, no, she's doing great now.
That's the real thing
Yeah.
I wanted to get to.
Yeah. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, no, she's doing good. She was able to the thing about it was, and on that episode, and one of the things I've spoken about before is you got to pick your fear,
Mhm.
right? Are you more scared of failure, or are you more fearful of stagnation? Like, which one really scares you? And to me, it's like, yeah, I don't want to fail, but I also don't want to be stagnant. I don't want it to be that years go by and I regret things that I could have done. That is the issue. And in that episode, she talks about how she had to get to that point where it's like, yeah, I don't want anyone on stage to maybe laugh at me, or maybe that I may stumble over my words, but I also don't want to keep running away from these opportunities that are coming my way, because she really feels like she has a gift. And it's like, well, if you have this gift, you're going to be held accountable for that gift. Did you maximize it? What would be your answer once you get to the grave? What would be your answer? And so that mindset shift for her was what helped her actually be able to do poetry, love it again, and get on stage.
That's awesome. Like seriously, that's chill inducing. Like I love success stories. Like I think you learn a lot from failure, and I'm sure
Mhm.
there are plenty of people that you've worked with that just it doesn't go that way. And it's usually I don't ever want to place blame, but a lot of times it's very easy for if I were to hire somebody and I don't get the exact results that I want, it's their fault. They
Yeah.
did the wrong thing. And I just find it exceptionally, again, I keep using the word refreshing because it's such a different way of viewing things. But do you have any of those kind of people that turn around and they're like, it's your fault that I am not, chiseled like
Yeah.
Ryan Gosling or whatever it is?
So, so the individual that I'm mentioning with reference to anxiety, getting behind the wheel, and we sat down, we had a 30-minute consultation. He was like, "Yep, let's do it. Let's work together." I was like, "Fantastic." And well, one of the first individuals that I actually charged and said, "Hey, we're going to work together, and here's my fee." So in in navigating that journey, it's not easy. So if anybody's listening and thinking, "Well, I want to start charging for a service that I've been doing," oftentimes it's like we have confidence in our service, but do you have confidence enough to put a price tag on it?
Right.
And that was the issue that I was having. So I was like, "Hey, don't worry, like let's just see where we are." So as opposed to just giving one free 30-minute strategy session where we just talk and dive into it, I was like, "Hey, I'll give you a couple more." And I did. I sat down for free for about 3 times, and within those 3 times, by the end of it, he had been sitting behind the wheel, facing his anxiety, and being able to drive a mile, which was a massive change from when we initiated. Well, I knew that I had arrived to this point where I had to say, "Hey, this is a service. There is a fee. Here is the fee." And when I got to that point of the conversation, he was like, "Hey, thank you so much, but I'm not going to do it because this week was the most horrible week and I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that." And I'm like, what about the last 2 weeks? What about the last 3 times that we've seen this
Right.
gradual growth? What about that? And that was tough because it felt like, well, did I do something wrong? And of course, after that, I had a couple more clients where I was like, okay, no, wait a minute. And there's this person that we have mutual friends. His name is Michael Faber, and he said something in one of these talks that he did. He said, you can give a coach, which is similar to what you were saying, where an individual can work with a coach and see massive success and say, "Man, I couldn't have done it without coach." And yet there's the other individual who uses the same coach, sees no results, and says it's all because of the coach. It's
Right.
like, well, who's right in this? Is it a great coach? Is it a bad coach? And to me, it really falls back on the individual. Are we doing the work? Are we really putting in the daily habits? Not just saying, "Well, am I accomplishing my goals?" Yeah, you want to obviously accomplish your goals, but you also want to live this out. It's much easier if you make it a daily habit. And then, of course, ideally, like any treatment, like any medicine, like anything that helps you, I mean, my thought is ideally you want to kind of wing away from that. The idea, at least to me, is can we implement something that can get you to where you want to get to? And then at least you build the confidence where you can replicate that. If you want to keep working together, fine, fantastic. I'm not going to complain, but ideally it would be you building the muscle.
Mhm. Well, unfortunately we are running low on time, so we're going to end on that because that was an awesome note. I always say you learn way more from failure than you do from constant success. I always say constant success. If everything's going really well, like sometimes you need. I mean, me personally, I need to be humbled every once in a while, and that's why I married my
Yeah.
wife because she's really good at keeping me humble. I also say she always keeps me accountable. So but it's almost like what you said. The coach that works for one doesn't work for another. Like I could marry anyone. Like
Mhm.
I'm a handsome guy. I could go
Yeah.
out and get married. But I knew within 6 months that the woman that I was dating at the time, I was going to marry her, and we did. And so, like, I love that kind of analogy where it's like you can work with somebody, but if they're not the right fit for you, it's not going
Right.
to work. And it's not a issue with you or the individual or whatever it is. It's just we don't fit. It's like taking two jigsaw pieces and trying to put them together. It just doesn't work.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, for all of our listeners, how could they find out more about you? Where could they go? Websites, anything like that?
Yeah, so you can go directly to miguellebron.com. Once you get to miguellebron.com, you'll be able to read all of the blogs I've put out. You'll also be able to listen to our podcast, Strategy Rewind, which of course is available on all audio streaming platforms. And if you wanted to set up a coaching session, we can easily do that from there from miguellebron.com.
That's awesome. Miguel, thank you so much for sitting down with us. This was fantastic. And I have a feeling you're going to be hearing from me again because I'm going to drag my wife down for one of these episodes. And I think she would pick your brain even better than I could.
Awesome. Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you to the listeners.
Thank you, Miguel. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you too.